Oh dear, so one domino has already fallen, and I didn't want to go out there and make an entire video talking about, oh, William Nylander has signed his $11.5 million by 8-year extension, because we already talked about that yesterday. And I just changed the title and the thumbnail of that video and added a disclaimer in the description, since all the analysis that there is to be done on an $11.5 Nylander extension was already done yesterday. I don't want to do it all over again. But what we can do is use this figure. Use this number, use these dollar amounts to try to talk about how this relates to Vancouver. Because everything is about Vancouver, right? Not about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Oh no. But today what we're doing is talking about how Nylander and his $11.5 million contract can maybe influence, maybe help out, maybe whatever it is. How this can impact the Elias Pettersson negotiations. Now, we did have ourselves a segment on Donnie and Dolly from earlier today, where Rick Dhaliwal pretty much reveals just that. He says on the show, which will be linked in the description if you want to go ahead and read this, that the Elias Pettersson negotiations will be impacted here. That the Nylander extension is so big and massive and important that this will be talked about for pretty much every big player negotiation into the next little while. And here's the thing, when you talk about these two guys, I mean, there was already kind of a link earlier in the season. We had those rumors coming out saying, yeah, like Pettersson and Nylander will both go to Chicago because they've got a lot of money and they can play together and play with Bedard and it'd be great. And like, that was a thing we talked about. I didn't believe it, but you know, it was there. Now, this is like part one of that entire saga coming to an official close as Nylander signs his 8-year extension. As for Elias Pettersson, if you wanted to go out there and use this contract number as a comparable figure for his own extensions, honestly, I kind of buy it, but I kind of don't at the same time. Mostly because when you talk about the Pettersson versus Nylander argument, I feel like Pettersson has, for the most part, been a better hockey player than Nylander for the majority of their careers, with the exception of this year and the year before last year, which is really confusing, but let me explain. So Nylander, of course, is a lot older than Elias Pettersson, 2014 draftee versus Pettersson being a 2017 draftee, therefore he made the league earlier and he's had more experience, but when it comes to what Elias Pettersson showed off last year, which was, I'd say, the entering of his prime era type of year, he had 102 points in 80 games played, and he had a better year than William Nylander, who had 87 points in 82 games. Now, we get how these things work. Last year, Austin Matthews and Marner kind of went off. Nylander was there, but he wasn't at the top of his game, but you had yourselves the playoffs where Nylander did show up and show off that this guy was very, very good, and debatably more important than Matthews and Marner and everybody else in the most valuable situations. I feel like for Elias Pettersson, the year he had last year was so good, and like one of the best examples of the dominance that we can see from him, that there's reason to believe that last season, yeah, if you were to talk about the negotiations for an extension then, Pettersson may have been able to get an argument done for getting a higher amount than Nylander. But this season, oh boy, you've already seen the numbers for this season. Elias Pettersson is on pace for 101 points. He's got 48 points in 39 games, so he technically is at the very same base level, like, point production metric that he had last year. But the problem with Pettersson this year is that you could very well say that he's not playing his best. And that's kind of the scary thing about it, that Pettersson has looked kind of off for a good chunk of the year. This is kind of nuts, because if you were to ask me, like, right now, oh yeah, if Nylander is worth 11.5, Pettersson shouldn't be able to get that, because Nylander this season has been a monster. Just so darn good. He's on pace for 120 points. He's got 54 in 37 games played. Nylander, if you wanted to talk about player comparable numbers to other Canucks, he should be compared more so to JT Miller, who is at the same amount of points in a very, you know, limited contract compared to Nylander's. Miller is only making $8 million, Nylander making 11.5 next year. So, of course, there's a little bit of an age curve there. It's different, not the same situation at all. But for William Nylander to get this contract in the midst of this season, it's kind of interesting to me, because if you try to say, oh yeah, Nylander got 11.5, which means Pettersson should get 11 point something. Like, I can buy the idea that Pettersson is going to be better than Nylander long term, but when you're in a season like PD is, where things haven't necessarily been the best, it kind of makes me wonder, where do the negotiations go, right? Like, do you find yourself settling for an 11 or an $11.5 million contract because Nylander got it, and because Pettersson is, let's just say, better than Nylander was when Nylander was Pettersson's current age? Like, they're separated by 3 years. 3 years is significant, but it's not the most amount of time. There's still some kind of a similar window of opportunity that both of these guys can present their hockey teams. So, is it close enough that you can debatably say, yeah, Pettersson should get less than Nylander, because Nylander is on pace for a 120-point pace year, and Pettersson is not. So, yeah, interesting questions, isn't it? Now, heading back over to the Donnie and Dolly segment, what I wanted to do was go over to NHLTradeTalk.com, because what they did was they summarized what it was that Dalibor went out there and said, so it's a little bit easier to follow along with what's being said. This article will also be linked in the description. Canucks Elias Pettersson to get shocking number after the Nylander deal. It brings up the same Dalibor video we had, and then it says this. Dalibor, providing insights into the Pettersson talks, assured fans that the silence in Vancouver surrounding Pettersson's talks doesn't indicate any negativity. He emphasized the importance of timing in these negotiations, expressing confidence that a deal would come together when the time is right for both parties. Noting that Petey is a restricted free agent and not an unrestricted free agent, Dalibor highlighted the critical distinction often overlooked in discussions about his contract. Anticipating a substantial figure for Pettersson, Dalibor argued that it could surpass Nylander's $11.5 million a year. So there's the assessment. Dalibor thinking that this could actually surpass, overtake what it is that Nylander got. Citing Pettersson's superior points per game and younger age, combined with his role as a center, Dalibor justified the expected high value. He stressed the significance of the waiting game, emphasizing Pettersson's ability to take his time in the negotiation process. Don Taylor then raised concerns about the potential challenge for the Canucks to accept a figure that exceeds JT Miller's salary by $3 million a year. Dalibor countered by underlying the role of timing and market dynamics, suggesting that the final number is as much about the player being worth it as what the market will dictate. And those are ultimately the biggest things that get impacted with this Nylander signing. Because, as we had talked about in the video a few days ago, we made this video saying that Elias Pettersson is not worth the money. Because, you know, at the beginning of the year, he was first in the league in points, and everybody was saying, yeah, he's going to get re-signed to a $12, $13 million contract because he's top of the league, and he's the best player, and he's tied with Quinn, tied with Miller, and it's going to be amazing. But then, like, you know, he started to falter off, and he became a little bit bad. Really bad at some points. It's been a tough year for Petey, honestly. Like, considering the fact that his point production is on pace to matching what he did last year, yet he's performing not as well as we think he could be, that maybe goes to show how good of a ceiling he does have, and maybe that does fuel an idea that says that he should be worth more than Nylander's 11.5. It's just, for a good chunk of this previous year, he has not been playing anywhere near a $12 million caliber player. Like, I feel like for many Canucks fans, 12-something mil, like 12.5 mil, still feels like, oh yeah, that's McDavid territory. Like, it literally is McDavid territory, but it's also like McKinnon territory. These are some of the best players in the NHL, and they're so consistent. Elias Pettersson, his season has been slumping so much that it's tough to see him in the same light, especially if you watch the Colorado or Oilers games that pop up on your TV every once in a while. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below how the William Nylander extension impacts Elias Pettersson and the Vancouver Canucks. Do you think this is as big of a deal as we're making it out to be? Do you think Pettersson is going to get something in the same range, more or less, than what Nylander got at 11.5 mil? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.